I had just re-enlisted, to keep on going in the Marine Corps. I'm like, the last thing that I want to be labeled is as broken, having PTSD, and but I mean, it wasn't as prominent as it is now.
Right.
It just people knew about it a little bit,
Hmm.
but it wasn't as as in your face as it is now. And yeah, I was struggling. I was struggling when I came back, and losing David. I mean, even we were the whole platoon. Our platoon was so close. I mean, it was like, I mean, man. I mean, we had a real tight knit platoon, and I mean, dudes from all walks of life, and I mean, of course, you got your less desirable Marines that you have in your platoon that are. We
Yeah.
all got that 10%.
Yeah.
But for the most part, no, for the most part, we were the best freaking platoon in the battalion. I'll put our platoon up against anybody, and we a lot of us became close. The especially our prior deployment to that was in Okinawa. So seeing different countries, training with different Marines, different from going from training with the Korean Marines, the Filipino Marines, the Royal Thai Marines, all of that. Training them, training with them, um, going out on on Liberty, in different ports. I mean, we got to watch our back. We're there for each other, and
Right.
we're training. We're living day in, day out. I've been with these, some of these guys, for 4 years, and others, for close to 3 years. So we become real tight, and and with Owens, David, he he was a gentle giant. He was just big old country boy, and I mean, he'll give you the shirt off his back. I mean, he'll be the somebody he won't look for a fight, but if somebody wants to fight, I don't think they're gonna want to fight him, or they're and uh, is but we become so close, and any loss of any of your dudes is gonna suck. It's gonna hurt. But with him, he was just such a good person, just all around. Would take care of you. And he was just the most badass saw gunner in the whole battalion. Everybody knew that anything to do with the saw. We put him up against competitions against other dudes, and he would just whoop their ass left and right. Um, and when on April 11th, when we got into that ambush, it was in Baghdad, the city. It was
Hmm.
urban fighting, and we're traveling up this main road, and it's dark as could be. We have our MVGs on, and I start seeing that. We start hearing in the radio we got movement up front, and so everybody's on the alert now. And then next, I see some movement, on a compound, to my left, and then all hell just breaks loose, and just we're taking fire, and so Dave Owens was right behind me, and we all know how to react in a firefight. He, you know, um, orientates his fire, to where we're taking fire from, and he just, lets loose. He just lets loose, and I kind of, I'm the fire team leader at that time, so I'm making sure that all of my guys are placed in the right position to where we could get most of effective fire. And I got my radio on, and I'm hearing orders from the squad leader, in case he wants to let me know he wants me to move my guys.
Right.
So we're set in, and but we just started taking fire. just out of not out of nowhere, but it just came on us to where we couldn't really take any cover. So we're laying fire from the prone. I put Owens in the prone position, orientate his fire, and I take a knee right next to him. So and I just start just orientating my fire to where we're taking fire from, and there was two different barrages of fire, and when I was moving back towards Owens, we get that second barrage of fire, and I take a knee right next to him, and that haunted me for a long time because I'm the bigger target. I'm taking a knee. I have him in the prone. He's only about yay big. Laid down suppressive fire, and he got shot in the head. And it's like, it's one of those things that you start, woulda, shoulda, coulda, the situation, and it messes with you like bad. And it did. It messed with me for a long time. And I'm like, you start asking dumb questions like, why him? Why not me? I'm there, taking a knee right next to him. I'm a bigger target, and why didn't I get shot? Why did he get shot? And we also lost our platoon sergeant that day, Staff Sergeant Tejeda, which that was crazy in itself too, because our last names were so similar. There was only one letter difference. So when the notice got sent out, when the report got sent out, it got sent out as I was a KIA, and they pulled it back real quick. They caught it on time, but remember I said earlier Veronica was pregnant.
But it never got back to her, did it?
No, it didn't. It didn't. So the next day after that firefight, the next day, that's when my company Gunnery told me what happened, and I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, can I call her? I'm like, let her know that I'm okay, that it wasn't me. But it sucked. Cause we lost our platoon sergeant, Staff Sergeant Tejeda, and
so at this time you're still a lance corporal, or had you?
I was a corporal.
You were a corporal, okay.
I was a corporal. Owens was a lance corporal, and it really, like, those two situations, those two Marines, losing those two Marines, really, it messed me up for a long time, like, especially, with Owens, being, that he was my boy, he was my boy, just, I'm a badass dude. And, I was just looking at pictures, saw him there. It always, like, it's good seeing those pictures, but
it's painful.
It is, and it takes you back. And I'm a whole lot. I don't want it to sound all like a pussy, but I'm a whole lot better now. Yeah. No, but I just, there's times that talking about it, like, I've never talked about it. I think this is the first time that I've ever talked about it in camera. About losing David, and it today it hurt a little bit more than other times. But I think it's because it goes with everything that's going on around the world right now. Mm-hmm. The way that the military is now, the way that you mentioned it earlier. How do we honor these guys? And we can't forget their names. We can't forget who they are. We got to keep on, saying their names. So the sacrifice that they did was not in vain.
Right.
And I don't think I've ever talked about Owens in this type of situation, in this setting, this type of setting, and it still freaking hurts. It does. I'm a whole lot better now with it. it still freaking hurts. It was one of my boys.
Yeah.
And the Staff Sergeant Tejeda was my platoon sergeant. He led us, and he was a badass himself. Dominican dude. I mean, sometimes I had hard times understanding him sometimes, so I could only imagine everybody else. I mean, he was just full of perseverance himself. Mm-hmm. Just he was one of the youngest staff sergeants, that I had ever met. I mean, wow. I want to say that this dude. So typically in the Marine Corps, in the infantry, a staff sergeant usually average 8 to 10 years. That's around how long it takes. If you get it under 8 years, you're doing something really, really good, right? But 8 to 10 years, more like on the 10 side.
Yeah.
That's when, typically infantry Marine picks up staff sergeant. This dude got it in 6.
Wow.
I mean, he was, as far as knowledge, Marine Corps knowledge, this dude was just a walking knowledge, good dude. And it sucks when you see that badass dude, get killed in combat. It sucks. It messes with you, So I think both of those situations, David being just so close to us, being almost at the peer level. Mm-hmm. He was under me, but he's still considered almost like on the peer level.
Right.
And our leader, probably one of the most badass staff sergeants that I ever met. So these two dudes just got killed in one night. And it fucked me up for a long time. I'm telling you, I used to drink probably almost on a daily basis, for a long time. Still until, I had to, really take a look at that mirror and realize that I re-enlisted to be better, to do better, and being on the bottle wasn't gonna be, right. Good for myself or for anybody else. It wasn't gonna be good for the institution.
But we see a lot of that, where alcohol and drugs is the way to forget, to numb it, whatever you want to say.
That's what it was for me.
And it takes a lot to look at yourself and understand this isn't working. So, I mean, we admire the fact that obviously, you came out of it, and I know this is tough on you. I can see it. I can see it, and I'm learning a lot about you. I thought I really knew y'all, but whoa. Well, this is the purpose of this, because people don't realize, and we talked about PTSD a while ago, just briefly. I think PTSD has a bad name. Yes, it's there. I think I got to watch my words here. I think it's become too easy to be classified for PTSD. I see people calling PTSD for car wrecks and all this stuff, and even the VA to a degree. When I talk to people, is they've made it too easy to get that designation. The media has made it sound like you're all going to be, and excuse the expression because it's what we used to use years ago, go postal.
Yeah.
And that's not what it is. When you look at the suicide rate amongst veterans, and they tie it to PTSD, if it's tied to PTSD, these guys aren't looking to hurt anybody else. They think, and this goes through talking to different widows through our Gold Star program that have experienced this, they think they're solving a problem for everybody. And all they're doing with it is leaving a shit show behind. And there is help out there, but there again, it goes back to that, you don't want to be that pussy. You don't want to be known as that broken person. And so a lot of guys aren't, that truly have it. And they're not seeking help. We talked on other sessions with other veterans that we're at that point of just ending it. and something sparked. And obviously with you, something sparked. I'm not saying you were at that point of ending it, but something sparked. Now, going back to, you lost those two people close to you that night. I mean, you're sad, probably pissed off.
Oh yeah.
You know, so after that, I mean, I'm assuming you've had more firefights and stuff. When did you get back to the States? When you were talking about the drinking? Because obviously over there you probably weren't drinking.
No, there's no drinking out there, none whatsoever.
Well, you got to respect their culture. You know, you don't drink over there.
Oh man, getting back is when so drinking was just it was my freaking way out. You know, it was like that's what I saw as my way out, my way of, and what I mean by way out is my way out of thinking of that situation.
Yeah.
Out of thinking, and it's just almost like your subconscious, you know, just says, "Hey, I'm gonna drink," and I'm not there no more. Even though that, as soon as the minute you stop drinking, you're freaking there again.
Yeah.
And it sucks. I mean, I'll never understand. I'll never understand, you know, or we'll never understand the grieving that a Gold Star family goes through. You know, and what we were going through, I'm sure that it's nothing compared to what what you know they're grieving, and rightfully so. I mean, there is just I can't even imagine the pain that they go through.
Well, and that's, you know, that's a very good point right there, because we talk about this a lot, and it's why in our organization, you know, the logo has the dog tag say "Soldiers Helping Soldiers." I can't relate to what you've been through because I've never been there, and it's so real, like what you're saying about the Gold Star families. Yeah, you lost your best friend, and I'm not discounting that, but it's different than losing a spouse, losing a parent, and until you've actually been there, you don't fully understand.
Yeah.
Now, these families go through a lot, and like I said a while ago, when there's families involved, they're serving right along with it, and you know, we've talked to a lot of these widows, and it's a tough deal. But let's get back to you, because I like you, man.
Well, yeah.
But you're struggling with the alcohol side of it, and obviously, and this may be a whole nother session to have Veronica on and talk, really learn what it was like.
Oh man.
But that had to take a toll on your married life.
Yes, and I don't see how any family could ever be ready for a returning service member when that service member has gone through that. And I mean, it was, I was back to making bad decisions.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, you know, on my personal life, you know, drinking all the time, not caring, not being, you know, not being there for her, not being there for the kids. One thing that I haven't mentioned is that my son was born, my older son. He was born the day I got back from Iraq. And
wow.
Yeah, so July 22nd of 03.
You were an emotional basket case, weren't you?
I'm telling you.
I mean, you've got sadness, you've got joy, you've got
and it's a lot. It's a lot, like never. I never even thought about it that way until now. I'm like, holy smokes, it's like it's. Now I'm never gonna make an excuse for any of my stupid things, stupid decisions that I made back then. I'm like, yeah, I'll take them, but yeah, I could see how somebody coming, will make all the make certain decisions.
Mm-hmm.
No excuse, but I could see how it might happen. I mean, I got back from my first combat deployment. Thought I was gonna get out of the military. I mean, it was just like that ride has been like, I mean, joining the military, joining the Marine Corps, 9/11 happens. You think you're gonna go to combat, you end up not going to combat. You go on a freaking a freaking booze cruise to Southeast Asia, and you come back, and like, all right, well, there's no combat, so I'm getting out. To wait a minute, stop, lock, stop, move. We still are going to combat. So now we're in combat, and and I was, my plans got just turned upside down. Ended up going to combat, coming back, losing friends. Junior was born on July 22nd. I actually, my career planner kind of hooked me up. With what I mean by that is that I wasn't supposed to really even be back for his birth. Because when you're in the military, you're in the Marine Corps. It sucks, but your family's in second place. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you're gonna have a kid. Too bad, so sad. Your job comes first. Your deployments come first, and that's how it should be. Sucks that it's that way, but I agree with that. That's how it should be. But when it's happening to you, it's really, really sucks.
Yeah,
it really sucks when it's happening to you. So because I re-enlisted out there in Kuwait right before we went into Iraq, I was no longer affected by stop, loss, stop, move. What I mean by that is that the guys that I was supposed to get out of the Marine Corps with, the ones, my peer group, they came in, they were all supposed to get out around that same time frame, that, March, April time frame, they were affected by stop, loss, stop, move. They got to come back. I want to say it was like mid-June, around end of May, mid-June. I can't remember exactly when. But when the major portion of our deployment, a major fighting portion of our deployment was done, when we got there, because 03 was, like I said, it was completely different from any other deployment. Because we got there, yes, we took, some losses, and we were in, some pretty kinetic, areas, in against the enemy out there. But at the end of April, things there was a lull in firefights. There was almost like a pause in craziness. So everybody thought that it was going to be like back in Desert Storm. We go in there, we whoop their ass. 5 days later, they give up, and everything's done, right? That's what happened in Desert Storm.
Mm-hmm.
It was super quick. So like, we were thinking that it was going to be something like that, even though that for us fighting was more than just those 5 days like they did back in Desert Storm. For us, it was like towards the end of April, May. The majority of there's still some firefights here and there, but for us, they're like all those guys that were affected by stop, loss, stop, move. The Marine Corps said, all right, now we're getting combat replacements, and you guys that were supposed to get out, you guys get to go home. Well, I re-enlisted, so I'm no longer affected by stop, loss, stop, move. I just raised my hand for another 4. So I'm like, well, ain't that a bitch? I'm like, so I'm like, could have been going home with these guys, in June, and made it home to my son being born. But no, I re-enlisted, so now I stay out there. Which I was like, it was one of those moments where, like, fuck, this sucks. Just because I wanted to be home when he was born.
Right.
No other reason, I didn't want to get out of deployment. I didn't, I'm like, my boys were there, and I loved doing what I did. But man, I'm like, man, this sucks. I just screwed myself out of being there for when my son is born. So that kind of did suck for us. But my career planner, we're pretty cool with each other, So I'm like, brother, my wife's pregnant. I'm like, what can you do for me as far as because there was really not much going on over there. We were just gonna finish off the rest of our deployment, and basically just be ready for whatever the next mission was going to be, the next whatever the Marine Corps was going to do with our unit. But we knew that we weren't going to be there for too long. They had already said that we were going to be returning back in August, August, September timeframe. So I'm like, okay, if I leave a little bit early, it's not like if I'm getting out of anything major. And we were, the firefights really went down a lot, by July. So I started telling the career planner, because he's the one in charge of guys that are getting orders to different places. He's like the career counselor of, all the guys in the battalion. So since I re-enlisted, I was outbound. My number was already, pretty much on the board as going somewhere else. So when I re-enlisted, they also ask you, they're like, okay, so you're going to re-enlist. Now, where do you want to go next? So there's a couple of things, when somebody re-enlists in the Marine Corps, somebody that's going to be a lifer, there's certain certain boxes you have to check to have a successful, 20 years in the Marine Corps. One of them is called special duty assignment, and there's a few different special duty assignments. So they enhance your career in the military.
Right.
Your chances for promotion and all of that stuff, all of that good stuff, right? So you get to choose one of your special duty assignments in order to be able to get further in the Marine Corps. So I chose recruiting duty. Before I left, I had been talking about it with my wife. We're like, okay, if I re-enlist, because it was still an if, I'm like, where do I go next? And typically that's when somebody during the second term, that's when you choose to do your SDA, your special duty assignment. And I wanted to be a drill instructor. I wanted to go out there, and be part of making Marines.
Right.
That's something that I always wanted to do. But we had, my wife had heard horror stories about, drill instructors are never home, because they're not. Drill instructors are really never home. It's work for 3 years straight. And so she's like, I don't know about that, not in those words, but she's like, I don't know about that, And she's so one of my squad leaders had chose recruiting duty, so he was going to go on recruiting duty after we got back. So he's like, Valise is going to be going on recruiting duty as his SDA. Well, once look at that, I'm like, sounds good. He's like, yeah. He's like, you get, because as a recruiter, sometimes you choose where you go and do recruiting duty. So there's a chance that you could go back home to your home,
right.
Hometown and be a recruiter there. Very seldomly does that happen, but it does. So I'm like, yeah, it doesn't sound too bad. So that was our kind of meet in the middle. Mm-hmm. Like I get stay in, but I get, I got to go on recruiting duty and not drill instructor duty, because she wasn't all about that idea of me not being home. Well, let me tell you, recruiting duty wasn't much better. Recruiters, especially when I did recruiting duty, oh my gosh, it was probably the worst time to be a recruiter because we were plussing up the Marine Corps, so you're working long ass hours. So yeah, about not being home all the time. Yeah, I pretty much wasn't home a lot. Um, but I had to choose what duty I was going to do next. So I talked to the career planner, and I'm like, I want to go on recruiting duty. So because my number was basically outbound from the battalion, he was able to kind of word things in a way where I was able to go back advanced party. So the unit, when we deploy out there, when we deploy, there's advanced party guys that a percentage of guys that get sent out to get everything ready
right.
for the big group to get there, the main body. And when we're retrograding, same thing. We send advanced party back home to get everything ready for the unit to come back home. So somehow, some way, I talked to the career planner. I'm like, put me in Advon, man. I'm like, Veronica's about to, have the baby. And so I was able to come home, I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks early, before the main unit, came back. And that's how I was able to be home the day that my son was born. But the only problem is that little bastard was born in the morning, and I got home that afternoon. So I still missed it.
Well,
and I still give him shit about that.
Yeah, but you were on your way. You were on your way.
Yeah. So made it back that day, but yeah.
Okay. So I mean, we've gone through a lot here. There's a lot to unpack, or you've unpacked a lot already. So you're back. You're a recruiter. That didn't sit well with you. So when did you get deployed again? How long was your recruitment service, and then when do you get deployed again?
3 years. So a special duty assignment is typically 3 years. 3 years. So when we got back, the unit got back, and I thought, so I was gonna head off and go out on recruiting duty, right? So that's what we had chosen as our special duty assignment. So we get back, the unit gets back, and that's when all hell broke loose again in Iraq. Just after getting back, the unit got back in August of 2003. And as the unit's training, we get back, we get leave and all that good stuff, but the unit starts training for the next mission of the unit. And the unit got orders to go back to Iraq that following year. But me, I got orders to go off on recruiting duty because that was the deal. I re-enlist and I come back. But when I found out that the unit was getting ready to deploy again to Iraq, I volunteered to go back with the unit. I'm like, shit, I'm like, a lot of the guys that I was there with the first time are going back. So I tried modifying my orders. I tried getting, the career planner to modify my orders and put a stop to my recruiting duty orders and deploy with the unit back to Iraq. This is one of those things. You don't want your guys to go back to combat and I going on recruiting duty just didn't sit well. Just don't tell Veronica, but I kind of, I'm so I go back and I talk to the career planner. I'm like, and I wasn't dealing with the same career planner. I was dealing with a different career planner. As this Gunnery, he was in charge, and so I'm like, hey, the unit's deploying back to Iraq. I'm like, what are the chances of me postponing my orders to recruiting duty and doing this deployment with them? I'm like, I promise I'll execute orders to recruiting duty afterwards. And they're like, no. They're like, you already got orders to recruiting school. They're like, the Marine Corps is not going to, cancel those orders to recruiting schools. Somehow, for some reason, the Marine Corps holds recruiting duty here and combat deployments here. I'm like, how the hell does that make any sense? And I'm like, I'm here, I'm volunteering, to go to combat again. And I'm like, I'll go on recruiting duty, but just later. And they're like, nope. So I tried, talking to them, but like, I have combat experience. We have new Marines with no combat experience. I'm like, why can't I deploy with them? It didn't work. I was a sergeant at that time. They're like, sergeant was not going to win against the gunny, and the sergeant was not going to win against the Marine Corps. So they're like, no. They're like, you're going on recruiting duty. You already had orders set in the books. So all I could do is until I executed orders to recruiting school, I was just left to training with the unit, helping the guys getting ready. They were going to go see some pretty heavy combat. And I did. I trained with them, try to pass on the knowledge that was passed down to me, try to pass it on to them. So try to prepare them for there was no preparing them for what they were going into, because it was bad. That deployment was bad. But I just tried doing my part and passing down the knowledge. That's what it is. That's what being, a Marine is. You learn and then you pass it down.
Right.
They went off to their deployment in 04, and that one sucked too. It sucked. Seeing them go, me staying here, me having to execute orders off, going off and doing recruiting duty. And my unit ended up in Fallujah, so everybody knows about Fallujah.
Oh gosh!
So it sucked. That was another blow.
That was a bloodbath.
That was another blow. Mentally for me,
Yeah.
because I'm like, man, I wanted to be there, and nobody knew how bad it was gonna be. But when we found out how bad it was, man, it sucked. Mentally, I'm like, fuck, this sucks. I wanted to be there. Especially when I saw names, names of my buddies coming back as injured in combat, and some, killed in combat, and it sucked. Once again, I tried, going and talking to the career planner about not going on recruiting duty and going off to combat, basically, and I got my ass chewed. The gunny, by that time, he had it with me. He's like, he had it, with me asking to be, part of, the unit being in combat rather than being on recruiting duty. So he brought up the part where, I missed my son's birth, because I was in in a combat deployment, not in combat at that time, but I was coming back from a combat deployment. He chewed my ass. He's like, you selfish POS. He's like, you have a kid at home. You have two kids at home. One that you missed, your wife. You're asking me to send you out there. He said, what if you freaking go out there and you freaking die? He's like, what then? What's gonna happen? He let me have it. But by that time, it's like, so my first go around on recruiting school, they didn't quite go as well. I had to go back to recruiting school, but since the unit was deploying and I was going to recruiting school like almost simultaneously, they were already gone. So when I got kind of booted from recruiting school, administrative purposes, that had a lot to do with my drinking.
Okay.
So I got booted from recruiting school. So now I get to go back to the unit, and the main body is out there on deployment. Is only ones and twosies here, and so now we start seeing names of guys, being injured in combat, and some of my buddies, like I said, seeing their names come back. It used to be faxes when we started using faxes. So I pick up a fax, that came through, and I see the name of one of my good buddies. And holy shit, that hurt. And I'm like, I was just pissed. And that's the time. That's the day that I got my ass chewed by the career planner because I go up there and I'm like, this is bullshit. I'm like, they need people. And we were gonna send some combat replacements out there. I'm like, send me in combat replacement. As part of the combat replacement group. And that's the day that I got my ass chewed. Well, one of the days, but that was the day that it was the worst ass chewing when it had to do with me trying to get it on that deployment. But it just seeing them go off there, it just never sat good with me, just personally. Just one of those personal things. I know I couldn't do anything about it.
Right.
It just freaking sucked not being able to do anything about it. Went off on recruiting duty. Recruiting duty sucked. It was horrible. Just making more bad decisions. Whenever I was, out there, drinking continued. It was a lot of work because we were plussing up the Marine Corps because we were, by that time, I mean, we had to plus up the Marine Corps going from 174,000 to 205,000. So that all ended up on the recruiters.
Right.
The recruiters. So it was just long days, like countless amount of long days of out there. It was, the higher ups just cracking the whip on you, trying to get those numbers in because we were plussing up the Marine Corps. And so it was a lot of work. And of course, when I wasn't at work, I was drinking, so that it was just a mess, and I mean, I'm only a year and some change out from my, first combat deployment. So everything that happened was just still super green and it was there and it was just, no excuses, but it was devastating on my abilities to make better decisions. But we made it. We made it out of recruiting duty together. Hanging in by, with my marriage by just, threads. But it was. I'm glad I left recruiting duty when I did. And we having a strong wife just made it to where I was able to complete a successful recruiting tour. I came back to the Marine Corps, to the fleet, what we call the Fleet Marine Corps, as a staff sergeant at that time. I had a successful recruiting tour. So when I got back, I was a staff sergeant and repeated the same thing all over again. So went back to being an infantry Marine. Just thank God. I was just so done with recruiting duty. Got back, did another deployment to Okinawa, and then that was in 2009, and then in 2010 went off to Afghanistan. And in 2009 it was the same thing. We went out there, force of readiness. Thought that things were going to happen with Pakistan and that whole mess out there. At times we were kind of, we're like, are we going to go in? Are we not? We thought that we were going to go in. When we were in the Philippines on that deployment, working with the Filipino Marines, and they had their own terrorism situation going on pretty hard out there with Abu Sayyaf. So we had times that we're like, all right, sweet, this is where we're going to go. We're going to go out there and take care of business out there. But, we were close, but didn't happen.
Right.
Came back from that deployment, continued training my guys. At that time, I'm already a platoon sergeant, so training my guys for the upcoming deployment. So it was nothing but train. And 2010 came around, and that's when I headed off to Afghanistan.
So Afghanistan, and you and I've talked about this, that was a different war.
It was. There's a significant difference. on how combat was in Iraq and in Afghanistan.
Because was it in Iraq? You were actually fighting a fighting force.
Yes.
Saddam's army.
Yes.
Now you get to Afghanistan, and that's a little bit different. I mean, it's a fighting force, but they're not an organized army.
Interesting that you say that, but
I mean, we know the history of Afghanistan. They've been fighting a long time.
They were different, but yes. So they were more uniform, we'll say, in Iraq, or they were in uniforms at times in Iraq, where in Afghanistan, the way that they fought was different. What I mean by that is they've been fighting forever, for one.
Mm-hmm.
So fighting is, sucks to say, but it's in their blood.
Yeah, it's a way of life for them.
It's a way of life, and so we get out there, and they were ready to fight us. They were just just no bones about it. They're like, you guys are here, we're gonna fight. And which is one of the reasons why we took so many casualties in my unit, because they were all about fighting. They were all about fighting. I mean, it was different. So we get out to Iraq, especially in the 03 deployment. The 03 deployment was completely different from the 04 deployment that or any other deployment that came after that in Iraq. Where we're out there and there's nothing established. There's no bases, no camps, we didn't have anything. We're just, out there invading, right? I hate using that word, but I mean, that's what it is. And we're there, we're looking for a fight, and when the fight, presents itself, we take care of business. And in Afghanistan, we get there. It's more. We knew where we were going. We knew what areas of operation, each company of the battalion is going to have, and each company has their own FOB, their forward operating base, and we operate from there. And so we're out there, we're patrolling from that base. That's basically like our headquarters, and we're sending out patrols, from there, and getting missions and conducting missions from there. But the enemy's all over the place. Then, just as we are somewhat organized, so are they. So they have their own headquarters, and we're always out, getting intel, getting information, trying to figure out where they're at. But they're I hate to give them credit, but those they were ready to stand toe to toe, and firefights in Afghanistan were different, but they were at sometimes they were a lot more intense than the firefights that we had in Iraq. The IED situation, that was a whole different situation. We didn't encounter that very many IEDs in 03. In 03, when we were in the invasion portion of Iraq, IEDs weren't really, around as much. When we got to Afghanistan, we had to deal with dudes that were actually going to go toe-to-toe and fight us, at the same time dealing with the IED presence. And I have my own thoughts on the unit, that we replaced. The area where we were operating, it was mainly held by the Brits, and they operated a lot different than how we operate. So when we got there, that area was just saturated with IEDs. Just the Taliban had free reign of the area of our area of operation. So when we got there, it's a whole different story. Right. We weren't going to let that fly, and our mission was different. Our mission was different, from what they had. And so when we got there, there was heavy fighting, extremely heavy fighting, and we had to deal with the IED presence. And since the units that were there before us really weren't, out there, operating the way we were operating, they had, freedom of movement, freedom of placing IEDs everywhere and anywhere. And unfortunately, I found one. And many of our dudes, found many other ones. So it was just, the finding was it's completely different.
It's not like you were out there digging around looking at them. I mean, and I hear they were very good at hiding them.
Oh man, yeah, they were.
Yeah, we were talking on the last session. We were talking with Matt Wheeler, EOD specialist, and he said you'd find one and then realize there's another 6 or 7 right around you.
Oh yeah,
it was crazy how much was out there. And we've heard stories of, with the electronics and stuff, where they can set off at a distance and dial in, and boom.
Yeah. Well, I mean, those bastards don't freaking play fair. Yeah. And that was one of the other major differences, I guess, between those two theaters of operation, that what they were, the way that they were conducting operations, the way, how they were, fighting us, partly with IEDs, and the other time, kinetic fighting. We had to adapt. As we always do, to that way of fighting, and it just threw, a different a wrench in our plans,
Yeah.
How we operate, how we fight. To now we're dealing with not just firefights, but now we're dealing with the IED presence, and that's a whole different animal in itself. And but that's what I was trying to say. They wouldn't stand a chance, if it was, even though that they were willing to, go ahead and fight us, and stand, in a firefight toe to toe with us, they wouldn't stand a chance had it not been for IEDs and basically using other methods.
Yeah.
I don't want to say cheating, but bastards, they wanted, if it wasn't because they were cheating with freaking IEDs, we would have freaking just, it would have been a whole different story. It would have been way, way different.
So what year was it now that you stepped on an IED?
2010. November 11th of 2010 is when I got struck by an IED.
Wow. That's Veterans Day, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Wow.
Quite some celebration.
Man. Well, you talk about on Veterans Day, you're wrapped up with a lot of different emotions.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Yep. And the day before that is Marine Corps birthday.
Oh, that's right.
So it's, yeah.
Well, you're a basket case that time of the year, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah, it sucks. It really, that time of year sucks. And I mean, so here we are 13 years, or 13 years and some change after the fact, right? I mean, I think I've learned how to deal with it pretty good. I learned pretty early how to deal with what happened pretty good. And I tell people this that because when I got injured, I had already been in the Marine Corps for quite some time. It wasn't my first time around.
Right.
It was I had a few different deployments under my belt. I was 30 years old. So my maturity level, even though that everything has man, I never before this I'd never seen never really sat down and thought about from what has it been since the day I joined to how things really ended up being. And man, seeing it is like, man, shit. It has been a roller coaster. It has been a damn roller coaster. So, but I attribute the way that I dealt with my injuries, for lack of better words, how successfully I dealt with it. I attribute that to, being a little bit more mature and having gone through so much prior to that. Having gone through so much, not that I had been, in ton of combat before that, but I had seen combat. I had seen different deployments. I had seen, just so many other, aspects of the Marine Corps, to where when I got hit, I already knew that there was a chance. Me re-enlisting a couple of times, it kind of goes without saying, what might happen.
Yeah.
So when you sit back and think about it, and you see some of these younger guys get hit, and how their world gets turned upside down, and how just they're angry at the world. It's like, man, rightfully so. Shoot, I mean, they're young, 18, 19, 20 year olds, and coming back, with catastrophic injuries that is gonna, change the rest of their life. I mean, so going from that, seeing that, I totally could see how they come back and they're pissed at the world. But me, on the other hand, I was 30 years old, a little bit more mature, or supposedly, right? Yeah.
I've questioned that a few times we've been out.
But I think I was just a little bit, more prepared to deal with, the situation. And, but yeah, November 11th, 2010, that was that day, that crazy day.
So what was, I've talked to several guys, and that they're pretty aware of what happened. Were you like that?
Yeah. Yep. I remember pretty much almost everything. Pretty much almost everything that happened that day. Yeah, and in talking to some of my dudes, that I was out there with, they've kind of filled in a little bit of the things that I have forgotten. But for the most part, I was awake, the whole time. I didn't lose consciousness at the time of the explosion. I lost consciousness about, an hour or so after the explosion. That's by that time my leg's gone. I'm in a stretcher. Getting ready to get flown out from our area of operations to the main hospital we got out there. But yeah, I didn't lose consciousness. It was talk about a friggin' unforgettable day. That was it. That was a mess. It was just that we were put in.
At what point for the people listening, you're a double amputee up to your how do they title?
So on double amputee, hip disarticulation on the left side, and high above the knee on the right side. So above the knee on one side, hip disarticulation on the other side. That's
So at what point did you know this? Did you learn this?
so so
And my follow-up question is going to be, what did that do to you?
man, I was a platoon sergeant when I got hit,
Right.
and not that very many platoon sergeants get hit in combat. It's well, for one, because it's only one platoon sergeant to each platoon, and so numbers, because of numbers,
Right.
there's not that very many platoon sergeants that exist, so not very many get hit. But I wasn't the type of platoon sergeant that was gonna use me being a platoon sergeant to not going out and operating with my guys. If my guys were out there patrolling on a daily basis, I wasn't going to be out there every single day with them, because that just goes against how we train.
Right.
We train to lead them and show them, so they could, so the squad leader, could be out there doing their stuff. So if I'm going to send out a squad patrol, which is, for the most part, what we were doing on a daily basis, we're sending out squad patrols.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't going to be there holding that squad leader's hand every day. However, I was the type that if there was a chance of me being able to go out there with him, I was going to go out there with him. Same thing with my my lieutenant, my platoon commander. Now he was on the other side. He wanted to be in every single patrol. So sometimes I had to, kind of be like, hey, sir, we can't do that. There's, I get it, because I want to be there, because we were getting into firefights all the time out there. So I'm like, I get it. You see that, we're getting into firefights, so we want to be there, because, those are our brothers, those are our, our guys, are, a lot of them are, well, not for the lieutenant, because the lieutenant's pretty young, but for me, all of those guys are younger than me, so they're like my little brothers.
Yeah.
So I want to be there with them.
But that's also a trait of a good leader. You go out there and you lead by example, and you can train and train and train, but my dad instilled this into me a long time ago. Don't ask others to do something you yourself are not willing to do.
Yes.
So by the fact
exactly.
that the way you train, they don't want you out there on every one of them, but the fact that you and even your lieutenant are willing to go, that inspires, and you're showing the people that you're leading by example. So I'm sorry to cut you off there.
No, you are 100% right. You're 100% right in that. And sometimes your mind plays tricks, with you. You're like, man, I'm like, if I wasn't out there so much, would I have gotten hit? You think about shit like that.
Yeah.
But I'm like, did I really put myself in that situation where, it's funny enough, the day that I got injured, I wasn't supposed to be on that patrol.
Really?
I put myself on that patrol. Yeah. So.
Well, that makes you second guess a lot of things.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, now you just gotta laugh about it. I'm alive. So now you just gotta laugh about it. So we had, the mission to go out there that day. There was a bridge that was being used by the Taliban. As they had the freedom of movement. It was that bridge had to go. So we were kind of higher ups wanted that bridge gone. So we were going to go out there and check out this bridge and look for the enemy. We were going to, anytime that we wanted to go, we were going to go out there, two things. We were going to have the main mission. Sometimes the main mission was to go look for a fight. And sometimes it was like that day, check out the bridge. And if they're there, we're going to fight. And so we sent out, the platoon, infantry platoon is comprised of 3 squads. We send out one of the squads. That's going to be your mission. You're going to go check out this bridge, see what's up. And if you get into a firefight, you get into a firefight. You know, the bridge gets destroyed. The bridge gets destroyed. You know, and we were gonna be that was probably about a kilometer and a half away from our fob. So we sent one of our squads out there, from our platoon, and in trace, we were gonna have another squad kind of like in the area, so if they get into a major firefight, because we knew that area was just, chances are they're gonna get into a firefight. So we're like, okay, we're gonna send another squad, kind of to be ready to as a reactionary force, So if they need us to support the mission, support the firefight, we were there. So I had so it's in a platoon. You got your platoon commander. He's in charge. The platoon sergeant is his right hand man, and then we have a platoon guide that's that's he's like third in command, we'll say. So we were the platoon commander said, okay, we'll send Sergeant Malgoza, with Sergeant Doty as the reactionary force, to them, kind of in trace,
right?
Following in trace. And so I look at the lieutenant. I'm like, no, sir. I'm like, we'll leave Malgoza. I'll go. I'm like, I want to be there. And that's how that put me there that day. So I'm like, interesting.
Yeah.
So, shit happens. And I mean, that day, yeah, I chose, that I wanted to go on that patrol, but that's just, I knew that I had information, as a platoon sergeant, on how everything, we have a bigger, we're more aware of the bigger picture on how things are going in our area of operation.
Right.
So, me being, the type of person that, type of leader that I was, at that time, I wanted to be there. Shit hits the fan, I want to be there. So that's why I, removed, the platoon guide, and I plugged myself onto the roster to go with that patrol that day. And so I told the platoon commander, I'm like, look, I'll leave him behind, and yes, our main mission is, if something happens, we're going to respond to, second squad being hit. If they get hit, we'll be there. But if that doesn't happen, where are we going to be out there? And that way I could go and I could get eyes on, because as a platoon sergeant, one of my main duties is evacuating my Marines. If something were to happen, somebody gets hit, it falls almost directly on me to get that evacuation, spun up.
Right.
And it's extremely important to know, your area of operation and it's and where you could land. Have some pre-designated landing zones. So if I have a squad operating in this area, I could already plug it in on my map and be like, if something were to happen here, this is where I could land a bird. This is where I could land it. Load them up and
right.
Just pre-planning ahead. That was my personal secondary mission that day. Go out there. Yes, we're taking care of, make sure that we could react to anything that happens in that area. But if nothing does happen, we'll move on and just keep on reconning the area, seeing where I could land the bird. Something were to happen for me to evacuate any of my guys, or for, we'll say, a resupply, just for anything, but to know where we have potential landing zones.
Right.
And we were out there, and one of that first squad that we had out there near the bridge, they did take some a heavy firefight that day, but they were able to get rid of the enemy on their own. So once they, we kind of did not a relief in place, but we'll just call it that. Then they were done with their mission. They went back to the fob, and we continued with, what was, my secondary mission, which was, get a look, get eyes on
Right.
pre-designated landing zones, and that's what we were doing. And we got to a point in our patrol. There was a tree line. There was a tree line, and we took a halt. Did a little powwow with the squad leader, and we basically map recon, get our maps out, be like, all right, this is where we're at. I want to go look at this area across this tree line, and so I'm gonna move myself. Normally, as a platoon sergeant, wherever I was at, whoever I was with. Whoever I was with, I usually used to tell them, okay, I'm just gonna hang around towards the back. I'm like, if you need me, I'm there. I got my radio. Whether we need a call for fire, call for helos or anything, any type of air assets.
Right.
I could get that done. And the squad leader could orientate fire to whatever he needs to do with the squad. So I was just there kind of as backup for him, right? So I would just kind of hang out in the back of the patrol, towards the back, not in the back, but towards the back. But when we got to that tree line, and after a little powwow, I'm like, hey, okay, so I want to get eyes on. And I pointed at the map here, here, and here. I'm like, so I'm gonna move myself, towards the front of the patrol. And we had our minesweeper, Marine, sweeping, for IEDs. We had him up front. Then we had his security, because he's concentrating on sweeping, for IEDs. And we had his guy, that's his security, basically looking around, making sure that, we're aware of what's going on. And so I told the squad leader, I'm like, I'm going to be behind him. And once we get out there, once we get past this tree line, we'll take another halt. We'll set up security for us, momentarily. I'll get eyes on, see what I want, and then we'll head back. I never made it out of the tree line. That tree line, there was an IED there, and they got me.